There were thousands of cameras pointed at that stage. Professional cameras from the production team, phone cameras from every row of a sold-out stadium, fan cams operated by people who have been recording Jimin's performances long enough to know exactly where to point and when. And in the middle of what should have been a moment of pure celebration, on a stage in a city where the streets had just been named after him, on a night that the national media of his own country had described as historic, Jimin almost fell. Not a stumble, not a slip that reads clearly as a technical accident, something more specific than that. Something that made the fans who were watching the most closely, the ones with the frame-by-frame footage, the ones who have been studying his body language for years, stop and look at it again. Because the way he almost fell does not look like the stage, it looks like something else entirely. This channel is for the fans who pay attention to the things that happen between the highlights, the moments that do not make the official recap, the ones that get discussed quietly, frame by frame, in the corners of the fandom that are always watching the most carefully. If you have already seen the clip and felt something was off, this video is going to give you the full context you were missing. And if you have not seen it yet, by the time this video ends, you will understand exactly why it matters. June 13th, 2026, Busan Asiad Main Stadium. Night 2 of the BTS Arirang World Tour Homecoming Concerts. The debut anniversary, the 13th. 55,000 people in the stadium, hundreds of thousands more watching via live viewing in cinemas across the world. Drone formations over Gwangali Beach had painted Jimin's face across the Busan sky the night before. National media had spent the week calling the streets around the venue Jimin Road. His father's cafe had become a destination that fans from around the world lined up for days to visit. At any measure, this was the peak of everything the Arirang era had been building toward. The most personal night of the most significant tour in K-pop history. A person in the city that made them, performing for the city that was now organizing itself around their name. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, in a moment that the production cameras caught but did not linger on, in a moment that fan cams captured from multiple angles without initially understanding what they were seeing, Jimin's footing shifted. Here is what the footage shows. During a high-intensity segment of the performance, a segment involving rapid movement across the full width of the 360-degree stage, Jimin's body made a motion that did not track with the choreography. Not a step in the wrong direction, not a slip from catching his foot on a monitor or a cable, something more internal than that. His balance shifted in a way that trained dance observers, including several who posted detailed frame-by-frame analyses in the hours following the concert, described as coming from above the knee rather than below it, from fatigue in the muscles that a dancer uses to maintain stability at high speed, rather than from an external obstacle. He caught himself, fully and immediately. The recovery was so smooth that the fans in the stadium rows closest to that section of the stage reported not having noticed anything unusual in real time. It was only when the fan cam footage circulated afterward that the moment became visible. But the people who study how Jimin moves noticed. And what they noticed raised a question that had been building quietly for several weeks before this concert even happened. Here is the layer that most of the immediate coverage of this moment missed. The Arirang World Tour, by the time of the Busan concerts on June 12th and 13th, had been running for more than 2 months at the level of physical intensity that only stadium-scale production demands. Goyang in April, Tokyo, Tampa, El Paso, Mexico City 3 nights, Stanford 3 nights, Las Vegas 4 nights. Each of those shows was approximately 2.5 hours of performance at the physical output level required by BTS's staging. The technical term for what accumulates in a performer's body over that kind of schedule is cumulative fatigue. It is not the kind of fatigue that rest between shows fully resolves, because the rest between shows in a tour of this scale is not extensive enough for full muscular recovery. It's the kind that builds show by show over weeks, that affects the deep stabilizing muscles before it affects the performance muscles, which is why a performer in cumulative fatigue can still execute difficult choreography while simultaneously becoming more vulnerable to exactly the kind of moment the Busan footage captured. The fans who analyzed the footage in the most detail in the days following the concert, the ones who are fluent enough in Jimin's physical language to notice the distinction between a stumble and a shift, were not panicking. Most of them were not even alarmed in the conventional sense. They were doing what they always do, watching carefully, documenting carefully, and asking the question that the observation raised. The question was not, is Jimin injured? He completed the concert, both concerts. The performances, by all accounts from everyone present, were extraordinary. Whatever the moment in the footage represented, it did not compromise the overall execution of either show. The question was, what is the cost? This is a question that the fandom has navigated many times across Jimin's career. He has a documented history of performing through pain and exhaustion, a history that he himself has acknowledged in various contexts over the years, including in the Rolling Stone interview from April 2026, where he described the process of making the solo album Face as something that was genuinely heavy, something he moved through without always knowing how to ask for help. Fans who have been watching him for years understand that Jimin's relationship with his own physical limits is not a simple one. He is not cavalier about his body, but he is also someone for whom the act of performance carries a weight that makes stopping or showing the difficulty feel like something other than a neutral choice.
And this is where the story reaches its most meaningful layer. Jimin in 2026 is a different performer from Jimin in 2019 in ways that are visible to anyone who has been watching carefully. More settled, more confident, more willing to take up space, to be seen, to occupy a stage rather than simply execute it. The Rolling Stone interview captures this shift in language. He talks about learning not to be afraid to ask, about approaching the arirang process without the paralysis of his earlier years. But the shift in confidence does not mean the shift in relationship with physical limits. Those two things are separate, and Jimin's willingness to be emotionally more open in 2026 does not automatically extend to being physically more conservative about what he asks of his body. He is still the person who, in multiple documented instances across his career, has performed through circumstances that most performers would have stopped for. He is still the person who, when asked whether he is too hard on himself, says, not really, even in contexts where the evidence suggests something more complicated than that. And the Busan footage is one more piece of evidence in that more complicated story. Here's the detail that the frame-by-frame analysis community noticed and that almost no one else was talking about in the days following the concert. The moment in the footage where Jimin's balance shifted, when looked at carefully in slow motion, shows a very specific micro-expression in his face in the second immediately following the shift. Not pain, not alarm, not the expression of someone who is afraid they are about to fall in front of 55,000 people. An expression of pure focus. The expression of someone whose entire available attention has been immediately redirected to a single task, recovery. Not concealment, not performance of normalcy, actual functional focus on the immediate problem. And then the focus resolved, the recovery happened, and within 2 seconds of the shift, he was back in full performance mode, as though the moment had not occurred. As though his body had simply processed a challenge and moved past it without requiring his performance persona to acknowledge it at all. That separation between what the body was navigating and what the performance continued to deliver is what the people who analyze how Jimin performs described as the most striking thing in the footage. Not that it happened, but the speed of the processing, the automaticity of the recovery. The evidence in that 2-second window of a performer who has been maintaining that separation for so long and so consistently that it no longer requires a conscious decision. The body dealt with what it had to deal with, and the performance continued. Nobody in the stadium knew. The question this raises, the one that has been running quietly through the fandom conversation since the footage surfaced, is not a simple one. We celebrate the capacity to do this, the ability to maintain performance at the highest level, regardless of what the body is navigating underneath, is something that audiences respond to, that critics praise, that award shows acknowledge. It is part of what makes Jimin extraordinary at what he does. And at the same time, it is a quality that can operate as its own kind of pressure. If you are always capable of making it look flawless, then the evidence of how costly the flawlessness becomes invisible. And invisible costs are the ones that accumulate without the people who care about you being able to see them coming. The fans who expressed concern in the days after the Busan footage circulated were expressing something more sustained than that. The accumulated concern of people who have been watching for years, who understand the pattern, and who find themselves in the specific position of caring about someone whose gift includes making the difficulty disappear before anyone has a chance to respond to it. There is a moment at the very end of the Busan concert footage, after the songs ended and the performances concluded, and the members were standing together on the stage for the final moments of the night, where Jimin is visible in the wide shot, not performing anything, just standing, breathing. It lasts about 4 seconds before the frame changes, and the fans who have been paying the closest attention for the longest time have said about those 4 seconds something that I think is the most honest description of what the Busan footage overall represents. Not that something is wrong, not that there is a crisis that nobody is addressing, but that there is a cost to what Jimin does, at the level he does it, over the duration he has been doing it. And that sometimes, in 4 seconds of a wide shot at the end of a historic night in his hometown, you can see it. Not because it breaks through, but because those 4 seconds are the only ones in the entire show where nothing was required of him, where the performance was over, where he was just a person, on a stage, in the city where he was born, breathing. The question I want to leave you with is this. We talk about protecting Jimin, about wanting him to be well, about hoping that the people around him see what the fans see when they watch this footage carefully. But the more honest question might be, what does protecting someone look like when the thing you want to protect them from is inseparable from who they are? When the capacity to make it look flawless is not just a professional skill, but part of the identity of a person who has defined himself for over a decade by not stopping. I do not have an answer to that, but I think it's the question worth sitting with. If you noticed something in the Busan footage, or if you have been tracking something about Jimin's physical presence across the Arirang tour that this video did not cover, write it in the comments. The most careful observations about Jimin always come from the people who have been watching with the most sustained attention. Until the next one, take care of yourselves, and as always, purple you.